All right, this is it. If you haven't been, get it before it's gone. Jesus Revolution. Should you see this movie? I'm gonna go ahead and get straight to the point and say yes, yes, and yes. So actually yesterday I just went to see the movie and I really wasn't planning on seeing the movie, but even today I heard that since people have been going to see the movie, even more revival has been breaking out actually in movie theaters, even in Miami, and I just feel like there's an overall atmosphere that people are just craving something deeper, something more stronger, more intense connection to God, instead of trying to find their satisfaction in all these different worldly things, entertainment, and, just the illusion of satisfaction that the world tries to provide. So my name is Lindsey, and I like to make videos on faith topics, vlogging, and freelancing as well. But in today's video, I'm going to be focusing on reviewing the movie Jesus Revolution from a sincere believer's perspective. So I'm going to break today's video into 4 parts. And the first part I'm going to be talking about is why I decided to see it. I originally wasn't planning on seeing it. I wasn't really even interested in seeing it, but I'm going to explain a little bit more why I decided to see it. And number 2, I'm going to give a little bit of behind the scenes at the movie theater I went to here in Nashville. It's actually the highest grossing AMC theater. I had not been to the movie theater in probably at least 10 years that I can remember. This one maybe more than 20 years. And I went with I would say pretty famous person, when I was in high school to the movies here, and that's one of my last memories of going to this movie theater. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the video. Number 3, I'm going to give you a little bit more perspective and I guess my review on the movie from a sincere believer's perspective, some pros and cons, likes and dislikes. I'm not an expert movie reviewer by any means, but if you haven't seen it, I can at least kind of help you gauge, is it something that you'd want to see? And number 4, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about the characters in the movie so you can kind of understand them a little bit better when you go to see it, and just, kind of help you give an overall bigger picture. I'm not going to give anything away. I will talk about a few different scenes in the movie, but nothing that's going to spoil it or anything like that. It's actually a pretty long movie. I guess it's 2 hours, but it's a pretty long movie and there's a lot involved with the movie. I have read in comments that, oh, they should have talked more about this or they should have talked more about that, but it's 2 hours. You can't fit everything into 2 hours. So I think they used the time they had to overall give a good impression of what the Jesus Revolution was like back in the 60s and 70s. Alright, so part 1 of this video, I'm going to give you a little more background on the characters, just so you can kind of understand what you're watching. Afterwards, I went and did a little research on the characters and I was like, oh, but in general, there's 3 or 4, 5 main characters, and the first one being Kelsey Grammer. He plays the pastor Chuck Smith in the movie, and basically he's just your typical salt of the earth, very loving, caring pastor person. Now, Lonnie Frisbee is the guy that you see in the movie that looks like Jesus, and he's played by Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen, which is a Christian series that honestly I haven't watched too much. My parents really like it, and I know other people really like it. Another big character in this movie is this guy named Greg Laurie, and he starts dating this girl in the movie named Kathy, and he's going through a lot of struggles with his mom and his own personal life, and that kind of plays out into the movie. And he probably plays the most central role in the movie, even though I thought it was going to be more about the Lonnie Frisbee guy. Well, they both kind of play almost a 50-50 equal role in the movie, but I would say overall Greg makes a bigger splash. Right now, I wasn't really thinking about going to see the Jesus Revolution movie. I was like, oh, I already know about Jesus. That's not really interesting for me. But then I heard my parents talking about it, and my dad actually grew up in Southern California for a part of his life, pretty close to this church, where the Jesus Revolution movie is taking place. But when he was growing up, he wasn't really into that denomination, so he didn't really know much about it. And he was younger when this was going on. He was about maybe preteen age, so it was a little bit before his time. But my mom, on the other hand, she grew up in Tennessee, and she really didn't know much about it, and she was also younger. So for them, it's kind of cool to see things going on as they were growing up, especially like spiritually and in the church and different movements, and for them to like look back and be like, oh wow. And I think it's happening again with Asbury. And I do just think there's like a shift. Like people are just hungry for like more of life, like, and people are just craving something deeper and more satisfying, especially when it comes to like their purpose and life in general. But one thing I really liked about this movie is that it really brought together people from different backgrounds that all like love Jesus and want to know more about the Bible and God and just all that, but from different backgrounds. And it just also kind of showed how God can use different people, imperfect people, flawed people, to share the gospel message of love and grace. So I feel like it's a movie that visually shows how God can reach and touch people no matter where they are in life. And I think a lot of people who don't go to church or who don't understand the Christian faith necessarily, they feel like, or even any faith for, just to say, they feel like they have to be perfect if they go to church, or they feel like they've drastically changed their life, and they don't understand that God actually wants to have relationship with imperfect people. And additionally, in this movie, we see examples of how ministry can get messy, and how just because you all go to the same church doesn't mean you believe all the same thing. That's one thing I used to think, like, if everyone goes to the same church, we all must agree on the same thing and think the same thing. And that's not true. Like, every single person at church is going to believe a little bit differently. And this is what can make ministry a little bit messy. And I think sometimes people get turned off from church because they have all these expectations of people in church, when really it's just a bunch of people with baggage coming together to worship the Lord. But just getting together with other people is really powerful and it's encouraging. And you have to understand that people come, they bring things they're dealing with to church. And it says in the Bible that Jesus came not to heal, not for necessarily the healthy, but to heal the sick. So people coming to church are in a process of transformation, and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to look a little messy, but that's okay. Like, our trust is in the Lord and not in people. For example, in the Bible, or Jesus has the 12 disciples, right? And some people have called them the disciples, mostly kind of making light that they weren't necessarily like the smartest group or the most educated group. But God, there's a phrase that says that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call. Like, if he's calling you regardless of your experiences, of your backgrounds, that's all you need. Like, just God picking you out. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to have a PhD or anything like that. And also, for example, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Moses, like, he didn't want to go to Pharaoh because he had a stuttering problem and he couldn't speak really well. Hey, and I'm not the perfect person to be speaking on YouTube. Sometimes I, stumble over my words too, but I have a message to share, and it might not come across perfectly, but I still feel like God's using me to share, important things on this channel. So you don't have to have everything figured out. It doesn't even matter. Even David in the Old Testament, he was like a shepherd boy, and he ended up becoming king. He also ended up committing adultery with Bathsheba. He wasn't perfect, but he loved the Lord, and God accredited that to him as righteousness. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament, which you may have heard of, the Apostle Paul, he actually used to be killing Christians left and right. He hated Christians. He was actually a well-respected rabbi, leader, a Pharisee. Like, he was like that, but then God ended up basically transforming him, and then he became a follower of Christ. He humbled himself, and he was like, all right, Lord, I'm going to stop persecuting your people. And then he became like one of the biggest, most well-known apostles in the New Testament, and he went all from Israel to Turkey to Greece and Rome, and spreading the gospel message. So God can use people from all walks of life to share his message. But in this movie particularly, we see that there is like a ruffling of feathers between the traditional churchgoers and hippies that come into the church, and not everyone sees eye to eye on it. And I think the biggest message from that, like in the New Testament, it says that that people look on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. And I think that's a big message we see, because we see some of these traditional churchgoers kind of like judging the outward appearance and not the heart of these hippie churchgoers. But that does change a little bit in the movie. I'm not going to give it all away, but I think that's a big message to, look at the heart of a person and not their outward appearance. But I'm not going to give the plot away. But overall, from the movie, there was like most of the scenes I liked and most everything I, really enjoyed. But there are a few scenes like of drug use that may make people feel uncomfortable. And just the way they hold the camera is a little bit shaky. But, just close your eyes if that's bothering you. But overall, that didn't bother me. I felt like it just lended to the realism that a lot of the people or the characters in the movie had, real life struggles with, drug use or substance abuse and, just trying to figure out which direction to go in life. I feel like in this movie there was a pretty realistic depiction of that. There was one scene in the movie that some people might consider controversial, and that's when the Lonnie Frisbee character, the guy who looks like Jesus, when he's kind of like the charismatic side of this movie, and then Chuck Smith is kind of the more like solemn, like down-to-earth pastor, preacher guy. So these two guys kind of like work together, but they have a little bit different delivery of the message. So Lonnie is definitely more charismatic, and we do see people slain in the spirit in the movie, and that did make other churchgoers uncomfortable, and they talk about that later. People have varying views on if that's real or if that's not real. I have my own experience with that. I think this was in 2016. I went abroad to Spain with my young adults pastor and his wife and another friend. And we were just visiting there, a couple of churches there, because we have like a missionary that lives in Spain. But I remember like one time after a church service, my young adult pastor, he asked the congregation if anyone wanted to come up for healing. So I was just standing over in the corner, like if anyone wanted prayer, I would be there to pray for them or, lay hands on them and just pray for them. But I wasn't expecting anything to happen. Like nothing like slaying in the spirit had happened at this church or on this trip at all. So up until this point, but this guy, he like came over to me to have me pray for his arm. He was like the guitar player in the band. And he was like, yeah, just pray for my arm. It's been really bothering me. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I just like put my hand on his elbow and I just started praying over him to be healed and, for the pain to go. And I wasn't maybe 5-10 seconds into that prayer and he just like fell right on the ground, straight hard, right on the ground. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know what to do. I think I just ran off and I just was like telling my pastor friend to come over and like check on him. And I don't know why that happens. I don't know if it's just like the Holy Spirit over the person. It's just like a strong presence. But I've never known anyone to get hurt from that. It hasn't happened to me personally, but I mean, just from that situation, like I was like, wow, that wasn't me. That was definitely something in the Holy Spirit that I can't explain. So when I see that happening, I don't judge people like, oh, that's fake or anything, just from my own experience. I do believe God works powerfully in ways we don't always understand. So for me, that didn't really bother me, that scene in the movie. One thing I hope that people get out of this is that it's an actual authentic revival, or that the experience they have isn't temporary. And a lot of times when they get on fire for the Lord, a lot of people like that will last for a period of time, and then like the everyday routine of life starts to creep in and they start to lose that flame. And one of the ways that people can stay full of God is to stay in the Word, to stay, surround yourself by other believers, to stay encouraged, to not start isolating yourself from other people and then like listening too much to the news or negative things. And just like the culture of doubt and depression can easily creep in unless you're really focused on God's Word and really seeking Him on a regular basis. But I really hope that people who are touched by this movie and this revival time really start seeking the Lord and become more discipled in the Word. There's a parable of the sower, and it's a parable in the Bible, and it's talking about seeds that fall on the ground, and some of the seed falls on rocky ground. And so it fell down in like little cracks, and it sprang up fast because there wasn't a lot of soil. But then when the sun came out, it like scorched the plant and it died quickly. And it's like a metaphor for people who, they get really excited about the word and they're on fire, and they spring up quickly. But as soon as like worries of the world come in, or just like desires for other things start to squash that desire for the Lord, their fire starts to burn out, and then they just kind of go back to living life as they did before. But there is seed that falls on good ground that grows up and it multiplies 20, 30, 100 times. That's the kind of seed I want to be. I don't want to be the seed that falls on the bad ground. And that's my prayer for people who are touched by this movie, that they would be the seed that falls on good ground that ends up producing a harvest of, 30, 50, 100 times, just producing fruit in their life from the transformation they've experienced in God's love, and, just receiving that revelation in their life. I heard that in Miami, even after people watched the movie, that they were breaking out in song and in worship and praying for people, and that happened in other cities too. And I just really hope that these people really have an authentic experience. And, one way to keep it going is to actually get involved in a church, and I would say like a spirit-filled church. Not just any church. For me, not all churches are the same. Some churches are just not really strong in the word. Some are more for entertainment. But I would really go to a strong Bible-based, spirit-filled church that believes the whole gospel. You can Google that. That's what I would do, my personal opinion. But, if you're struggling with something, there are answers out there, and there's healing out there. And one of the ways is being born again. That you'll see that in the movie when they get baptized. It's basically just being born again. It's like starting over. It's just like wiping your slate clean. So that's a really powerful scene in the movie too, when they're getting baptized at the Pirates Cove. Something I really enjoyed. So why did I want to see the movie? I actually I wanted to see the movie when my dad told me that we actually went to Chuck Smith's church to visit for Easter Sunday in 2006. Me and my dad, we went to Southern California for like a week and a half for a trip, and he was visiting where he used to live. So, and some of his friends invited us to Chuck Smith's church. So we went out there for Easter Sunday, and we went to the sunrise service also on the beach at Huntington Beach. And that was a really cool experience. And I was like, oh wow, like I had no idea. And my dad, he didn't actually know at that time either anything about the Jesus Revolution, because it really wasn't going on anymore after, I guess, 1972, 1973. For that reason, I really wanted to go out. I wanted to watch this movie and kind of, get a little behind the scenes of things that happened at this church. So the movie theater that I went to see the movie in, it was here in South Nashville in the Cool Springs area. And it's the movie theater I grew up going to, and it's called Thoroughbred 20. And apparently it's like the highest grossing movie theater, AMC movie theater in the world. It's pretty big. And I don't know if they meant that for the Jesus Revolution movie or in general. I should have specified that. But I remember in high school, one of my friends was friends with Dolly Parton's niece, and so they used to hang out a lot, and Dolly Parton she's like, hey, you want to bring your friends to the movies with me? So me and probably I would say maybe 10 of our friends went with Dolly to the movies at this movie theater to see the movie Signs. It's like a UFO movie. It was really funny, but I was like, I can't believe I'm at the movie theater with Dolly. It was hilarious. So overall, I hope I didn't give away too much, but I really enjoyed the movie. I liked the cinematography. I liked the retro color grading of the movie. And one thing that was interesting is that they put captions underneath the movie, like what people were saying throughout the whole movie in English. I think that's just like a new trend to put captions on everything, because people tend to stay more engaged when they have the captions. And when people make comments under their breath, you can actually understand what they said. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I actually really want to see it a second time. But I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend to see it. It's probably one of the more uplifting movies I've ever seen in the movie theater. Most movies, are scary or romantic but depressing or just really dramatic. But I really felt like this one overall, the message, I think, was a message of grace and faith and love. And, regardless of your background or where you come from, Jesus will love you, and you know, he wants to have a relationship with you, basically. Like, that's what it's really about. It's not about being religious. That's actually like a bad word to a lot of Christians. Like, religious behavior is kind of like, you know, people don't want to be religious. They want to have a relationship with God. And God wants a relationship with us, and that's why he created us. So anyway, that's it for now. I'll preach more in some other videos. But anyway, if you enjoyed this content, subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments what you thought if you saw it, or if you have any questions, put it down in the comments. I love answering comments. And anyway, hit the thumbs up if you like it. Check out my testimony video if you want to. And I will see you in the next video. Last time I came here was with Dolly Parton back in 2002. I think we saw the movie Signs. Remember that, Mom?
Signs?
Yeah. When I went with Dolly Parton to the movies. Way back in the day. In high school. It was probably 2002 or 2003. One of those.
High school.
Yeah. I was friends with some attorneys.
Here?
Yeah, I went in. Man. So we were just talking to the girl at the concession stand, and actually this AMC movie theater is the highest grossing AMC in the whole entire world here in South Nashville. All right, this is it. If you haven't been, get it before it's gone. So this is like my first movie theater experience in such a long time.
It is my destiny to win the heavyweight championship belt again.